Hi, this is Gautam, and welcome to the second episode of Parallel Lives. And for this episode, we'll be going to the United States of America, where we discuss the autobiography of two leaders who spearheaded the civil rights movement. Uh, the autobiography of Malcolm X and the autobiography of Martin Luther King Jr. Before we proceed with the book review, I just want you to understand that there is a slight difference in the way the autobiographies are written. Like if you take the first book, or the autobiography of Malcolm X, it had an assistant editor, Alex Haley. So this was written with the consultation of Malcolm X. I mean, like the Alex Haley writes, listens to Malcolm X, he writes the script, and then he goes on to him, and then modifications are made. That's how, like, you have an assistant who works with Malcolm X. Okay, but if you take this autobiography, it's clearly given, it is edited by Claiborne Carson. Thing is, this book was published posthumously. So what Mr. Claiborne Carson has done is that he's trying to compile, the autobiography of Martin Luther King Jr. by using his works. Mr. Martin Luther King has written so many texts. Not just your books which are popular among the population, but also his speeches. So he's technically created an autobiography by compiling his speeches and his writings. Now, usually when one talks about the history of civil rights movement, which was very popular in 1950s and 1960s in the United States of America, it is simply said or dismissed as a dichotomy between a violent method of agitation by Malcolm X and a non-violent form of agitation by Martin Luther King Jr. But I think it's more of a simplistic, description, because if you really want to understand why they went for certain different methods of agitation, it is essential to appreciate what drove them in the direction first. So the book, which is the autobiography of Malcolm X, spends a considerable amount of time on narrating his childhood and how he, takes up the philosophy of Islam, and then how he feels that a certain form of agitation is very necessary for a movement to be successful. So Malcolm X, his father gets killed in a very early age, and he gets separated from his mother, and right from then he starts to develop a dislike for the welfare association. He says that the people of welfare really does not understand what he mean by welfare. So he's put in a school, and later you see that Malcolm X migrates from the rural to the urban setup. He migrates from, you're talking about the northern states of the United States of America, so he migrates from Lansing to Boston, and you see that youngster who sees so many possibilities in life. He just goes to the urban center, he looks at the city, he's really impressed, and he wants to try as many things as possible. So he begins to take up art jobs, just by working as a server, and then he starts shoe shining, and slowly he goes on to the darker side. So he enters into, begins as a hustler, begins as a runner for illegal gambling, then slowly into bootlegging, and slowly into drug peddling also. So these illegal activities, brings up Malcolm X to prison. On the contrary, if you look at the autobiography of Martin Luther King Jr., as I already told you, it is edited by mostly from his speeches. So it's mostly a political, it's mostly about his political and social history, but you have a glimpse of his early years also. In his early years, you see this child who is growing up in a tightly knit family, a very religious family. His father, again, is very close to the church. He's a preacher himself. So you have this strong association of this Christian philosophy, this Christian family in which Martin Luther King grows up. So he goes to school, he participates in oratorical competitions, and then slowly he begins to, he does his bachelor's in sociology. Then he also enters into systemic theology. So when he gets an opportunity to understand systemic, he reads philosophy, and he also gets exposure to Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi, who later is known as Mahatma Gandhi, and he studies the principle of non-violence. And when he studies the principle of non-violence, King is convinced that the method of non-violence resistance is fundamentally Christian. That you preach tolerance, that you preach, you don't preach hatred, and you accept that the other individual will take some time to understand your own position. So he sees the non-violent method of agitation of Gandhi as fundamentally Christian, and that helps King to accept and take up the ideology as a form of agitation in all his future protests. Now, By the time King is convinced that non-violence will be the right form of agitation, and he starts participating first in the Montgomery movement, where they fight now along with Rosa Parks against segregation of whites and blacks, on how they travel in buses, that they fight for desegregation. You look at Malcolm X. Malcolm X finds his rebirth in prison. So in prison, he's introduced to this Islamic preacher, Elijah Muhammad. He begins to, look at his, he hears about him, and he gets transcripts of his teachings. He starts writing letters to him, and slowly he begins to adapt to this religious philosophy, and slowly he begins to read as much as possible in prison. He writes, he gets back letters at the same time. He looks at books in prison and starts to read. That is when Malcolm X begins to understand, or he begins to develop his own, theory that if you really need to be, overcome this segregation which you find in USA, then you need to go for this principle of separation. That is when he understands that, there are several references where he says that the white man is the devil. And even though it might seem to be an aggressive statement to simply say that the white man, just to classify a set of beings based on skin color, the opposite. He says that when he says white man is a devil, he doesn't mean the white man, but the wrongdoings of the white man, especially the forceful migration of large number of Africans to United States of America. So from the teachings of Elijah Muhammad, which later Malcolm X begins to improvise, so he just writes about it. We just see a very small paragraph where he says, every time he mentioned separation, some of them would cry that we Muslims were standing for the same thing that white racists and demagogues stood for. I would explain the difference. No, we reject segregation even more militantly than you say you do. We want separation, which is not the same. The Honorable Elijah Muhammad teaches us that segregation is when your life and liberty are controlled, regulated by someone else. To segregate means to control. Segregation is that which is forced upon inferiors by superiors, but separation is that which is done voluntarily by two equals for the good of both. So I think you get the difference where he imbibes the philosophy, and he begins to appreciate that he feels that the right solution for which is good for both the whites and blacks is to go for complete separation, because that's where he talks. You have this frequent statement which is given by Malcolm X, that you call me violent preacher, but because I talk about separation, but you've been segregating the African Americans for so long, and that does not seem to be a big sin to you. Why do you even call me violent, whereas you've been following violent practices for several hundred years? And this is where you see there is a slight difference in approach between King and Malcolm X. Malcolm X feels that within the black population there is not much of coordination. That within the United States of America, you see that the black agitation in North is completely different from the South, because King operates primarily in the southern states of the United States. Only you have King making his speeches in Chicago, but you feel that when you read both the books, you see that there is some sort of not so much of coordination between that. For example, there are apprehensions on both sides that one side is not taking or is really not understanding the other. For example, Malcolm X writes, the miracle is that the white man's puppets, look at the word which he uses, the miracle is that the white man's puppets, Negro leaders, his preachers and the educated Negroes, laden with degrees, and others who have allowed to wax fat of their black poor brothers, have been able to hold the black masses quiet until now. So Malcolm X feels that within African Americans, you have this educated population which really does not understand the plight of the poor African Americans. So that's his stand. But then if you read the statements which are given by Martin Luther King Jr., you can clearly see that he doesn't see eye to eye with Malcolm X. He says, there is a chapter dedicated to Malcolm X in the text. I met Malcolm X once in Washington, but circumstances didn't enable me to talk with him for more than a minute. He's very articulate, but I totally disagree with many of his political and philosophical views, at least insofar as I understand where he now stands. I don't want to sound self-righteous or absolutist, or that I have the only truth, the only way. Maybe he does have some kind of answers. I know that I've often wished that he would talk less of violence, because violence is not going to solve a problem. And he goes on to explain later, what exactly does he mean by non-violence. So he says, my feeling has always been that they have never understood what I was saying. They did not see there is a great deal of difference between non-resistance to evil and non-violent resistance. So that is where you find the difference in approaches, and the difference in approaches is fundamentally driven by the place, by how their initial and early lives was changed and the way they perceive things. So if you really want to understand the civil rights movement, it's really good that you look at the prism. Look at two different prisms, two different sides of the argument to understand like how civil rights movement got shaped in the United States of America. They held the limelight in 1950s and 1960s. Now you might also be asking this question, like why it is essential that, like, if like I'm an Indian, so why is it essential that you understand or read about a civil rights movement which happened in some other country which is miles and miles far away? See, do understand that every country or every region in the world has one form of suppression or the other, and you have civil rights movement in different parts of the world. For example, it's not that because these two leaders were present, the civil rights movement has pretty much the issue was solved. You take the current decade, in the last decade alone, you have several instances of Black Lives Matter movement, and the movement is still not over. Like there is claims of racial injustice which spreads across many cities and states in the United States, and they consistently say that society hasn't changed and racism persists in many forms. So if racism is one form of oppression, you have let's take India, you have casteism, and how to fight or how to overcome this issue of casteism in India, how to really abolish casteism. We have several leaders and several movements, where they say that untouchability needs to be abolished. And one thing which we can understand here is, even though both the leaders try their level best to push things forward, in one way or the other there is some discoordination, and this lack of coordination might end up hurting the benefit of the entire population, because once you start segregating your movement, then the energy kind of divides and dilutes out. And one thing which you need to keep it in mind, in spite of what method of agitation both leaders followed, both of them were assassinated in 1960s at the end. Once they finished both the books, I was just hoping, if both of them had lived for a few more years, and both of them would have revised, or they would have come to a common understanding. And once they could find a common platform, you could see that Malcolm X changes in the meaning. He begins to reconsider his own philosophy, and that's how leaders evolve, isn't it? You take Gandhi's principle. Gandhi was not the same person in 1880s and then 1880s, 1890s when he was in South Africa, and the same person when he died in 1948. Gandhi's philosophy goes so much of transformation. It's very natural for leaders to change their ideas because they might find something new. So you see that Malcolm X at the end, there is some rift with Elijah Muhammad, and he just wants to approach things in a different way. And if both of them had lived for longer, possibly 10 years, 20 years, if they were not assassinated, I'm pretty sure they might have found common ground, and the movement would have had more unified leadership. So for the civil rights movements in the United States, these two are in my opinion, are very good books to start with. And my request is this: if you know any books on the civil rights movement, be it fiction or non-fiction, you can definitely post it in the comments section, and I'll be glad to read it. Last but not the least, I know that this episode is delayed by 1 week, and today I should actually be posting dystopian classics. See, the plan gets shifted by just 1 week. I hope you don't mind, because I had to shift all my things as I had to migrate for work. So I hope, thanks to the subscribers for waiting for 1 week. So with dystopian classics, I'll meet you on next Sunday. Okay, that's it for now. Thank you.